Hey, hello. So this is Fernando Ribeiro, and today I'll start providing some video tutorials for the Yuma race creation. As you can see here, we have the werewolf race, and this is basically an example of what can be achieved for Yuma when creating new races for the Yuma avatar system. As you can see here, I've decided to keep the default humanoid sliders, the humanoid DNA, so that I keep this as simple as possible. But it's really important to keep in mind that creating a new race is actually the most complex step for Yuma, and so you need to understand all the process to fully develop something new here. Also, those high quality textures for the werewolf will be provided separately on Asset Store, specifically for the people looking not only for the tutorial, but actually to use those files for a final game or product. So here we have GitHub, and all the open source files provided will be here on the werewolf content pack. I just uploaded this one, and in fact, I also included one extra file, the Unity pack. Anyone familiar with content creation will notice it's basically the same structure, and you can download it here. So let me show the files, the actual files. This is basically what you get when you download that specifically zip file, and we have the object files for sculpting, and the FBX files that also include the rig and scanning data. And we have, of course, the Blender file itself and the base textures. The base textures are not the high quality textures, they are basically the UV layout specifically for the werewolf race. So we have a neutral normal map, a neutral specular and gloss data, and the actual diffuse channel is basically the UV layout, so that you can actually create your own content if you're willing to have a special and unique uh, texture work for the werewolf. You can see here the head UV layout. I've basically kept the same texture size from the human base meshes, but we also have the hands and feet as separated textures as well. So let's jump here to Unity, and this is basically the project I'll be using to include the werewolf race. And we have here the default crowd scene, example scene. As I always say, the performance we are getting here is not actually the real performance, as I'm still using a quite weak computer, and I'm also recording this video as well. So this version of Yuma is actually the one at GitHub. So it's not the same as we have on the asset store. This is really important. So you should download this one. And okay, here I'm going to create the base folders for the new files of the werewolf. So the werewolf base folder that later on I will include on the tutorial folder. The overlays folder. I'm also going to create the slots and 3D models folders. So 3D models, and here the slots. Okay, so here I'm going to open the files from the werewolf and the FBX files, and I'm going to drag all of the tree to the 3D models. So after it's imported, okay, I will also now drag the textures. So I will basically include all the folder to the overlays. This will take a while, so I'll simply cut the video until it's done. Okay, done. So now I will simply rename this to raw textures, so I can identify later that those are the original files. You can see that we have the diffuse, normal, and specular data. So this is really important. I will set all the textures so that they have the highest resolution and also no compression at all, because I'm basically going to, after, generate the processed textures, and I don't want to compress them twice, so I want the original files. Also, this is important for the normal maps. I don't actually need to set them as normal map. The texture type needs to be texture, the default one, because the calculation is done on the material builder. And we have the alpha channel for the specular, that would actually be the gloss. And as we are working with the base textures, there is no need for an alpha channel on the diffuse texture at all. So now let's adjust some of the import settings for those 3D models. We have the unified, the separated, and the teeth and claws. I will select all of them and set the scale factor to 1. And usually I don't like to import the materials, but this is up to you. I will hit apply here. Usually there's a small bug on the preview window and the preview will deform, but if you deselect and select again, everything will be visible and working fine. So I just dragged the unified model to the scene so I can actually preview the shape itself and see if its scale is correct, and also the rotation. So this is really important. We need to keep an eye if both of the files are okay. I now have the separated file. As you can see, the seams are visible here because they didn't have been processed. That's why we have the unified version also, because this is from where we calculate and remove the seams using the material builder. Here on the rig, I'm going to set this as humanoid. This is really important. And I'm going to apply here. So now the unified avatar will have its own mechanism avatar. I will save this, the scene itself, and here we will be able to preview the werewolf itself. As you can see, by default, the mechanism already sets the werewolf to T-pose, but the bones themselves are not correctly mapped. So I cleared the mapping, and I'm going to load this. So here in Yuma project, we have the mechanism templates, and as the werewolf uses the same as the male rig structure, I can actually use this. And if I take a look here on the head, I usually don't include eyes and the jaw. So if you want those, you can actually set up those here. I'm just going to hit apply. And I'm actually, right now, I'm not going to adjust the T-pose itself. I will leave this for later. So let me just get rid of that updates. And I'm going to reset the T-pose for now. This will be later adjusted correctly, but I'm just going to enforce the default T-pose. That's basically what the initial setup does for making it. So hit and apply here, and after that, this is super important, and this is something that I've never explained before. We select the werewolf race and click on Yuma toolbar and extract T-pose. So this will generate the T-pose file that will be later necessary for other steps. The generated file will be available on the T-poses here. As you can see, the werewolf race has already been generated. This is basically a lot of data that is not readable, but the human system handles and understand how to handle this data when creating or recreating the mechanism after. So after all those steps, the next one will be this here. So you will notice that we have the races folder, and this includes prefab and also race assets. And this goes here on the Yuma crowd. You can see the race library, and if we get the race library, we have both the human female and male avatars races. So we have those two races and the actual prefab. I'll drag the prefab here. This will be necessary because we can actually take a look on the prefab structure and replicate the same structure for the werewolf prefab. So we have the base components like the animator, locomotion script, the Yuma data itself that holds all the essential files for generating the avatar. We have the collider, rigid body, and the twist bones. That's basically responsible for rotating the twist bone adjusts based on the hand rotation. We have the actual mesh. It's actually separated in 7 different submeshes, but it's actually after generated, all the meshes are baked together and merged. So we have the global bone. This is essential. It's really important. And it's also good to keep an eye here on the rotation of the base model, and also the rotation about the mesh itself. This is really important to be sure that the rotations are matching. So what I'm going to do now is to actually drag here the 3D model of the werewolf, the unified one, because this one will be used for generating the prefab. So the first thing we need to understand is that this guy matches the volume of the torso of the male humanoid, the male avatar. So this makes it possible that we have both the torso, arms, and the upper area of the legs matching the equipment and clothes of the male avatar. That's what can guarantee that those clothes fit together on both races. So I'm going to create here the race folder so that I can actually later drag the prefab from the unified werewolf. So you're gonna notice that we have a different number of game objects for the prefab. So I need to create an empty one here, and I will call this one based on the prefab from the male. So this one will be the Yuma werewolf. Okay, and keep an eye on the position and rotation values for this. And so I will parent the actual 3D model to this empty game object. So we need to match the same hierarchy. And now I start copying the components from the male unified model to the werewolf one. So in this one, I need to adjust the avatar data. So I'm going to use the werewolf unified avatar. This is really important because it's the one that I've created before. Okay, this one. So I need to drag here, and then okay. And the locomotion, this is I will keep the same, but you can actually create your own separated animator for the werewolf, different and unique one. And I'm going to paste here the same locomotion script that will actually integrate with the animator. So we are running on the time limit for this video. I will keep the rest of the explanation on the following one. So that's it. Goodbye guys. See ya.